I never thought my own birthday would turn into the most humiliating day of my life. I had always loved celebrating with my family, thinking birthdays were these little islands of joy where laughter and memories outshine all the stress of everyday life. But that day, I learned just how quickly everything could spiral out of control. Picture this: my living room, decorated with balloons and fairy lights, the table groaning under the weight of homemade cake and dishes my kids had secretly prepared while I napped in my bedroom, my favorite playlist humming softly in the background. And then she came, my daughter-in-law. The one person I had always tried to get along with, the one I had bent over backward for over the years, and the one who chose that exact moment to lose every ounce of civility she had ever pretended to have. She didn't just get upset. She didn't just say something rude. She screamed. She screamed in a way that made everyone, my husband, my sons, my friends, and extended family, turn toward her, utterly shocked. The kind of scream that pierces through not only the ears, but the very fabric of the room. And if that wasn't bad enough, what followed after those first few seconds of chaos is something I will never, ever forget. She exposed herself, in front of everyone, and I'm not exaggerating. The room froze. The music cut into static in my ears. My heart stopped. I couldn't believe what was happening. I still can't. Was I wrong for confronting her when it happened? Tell me, if this had been your birthday, would you have stayed silent, or would you have lost control too? It all started a few weeks before my birthday. I had been planning a small family gathering, nothing extravagant, just a cozy celebration. I had invited my closest friends and family, my husband, my 2 sons, my daughter-in-law, my mother, my brother, and a few neighbors we were close to. I wanted everyone to feel welcome, and I went out of my way to make the house look beautiful. I even asked my sons to help with decorations and the food, secretly excited to see them bonding in the kitchen. For weeks, I had imagined the smiles, the laughter, the warm embraces. But my daughter-in-law, ever since she married my eldest son, had been a complicated presence. She was always polite in front of me, yes, but there was an undercurrent of tension, a subtle judgment, the kind that makes you constantly second-guess yourself. I thought I had handled it well, though. I told myself that as long as she behaved, I would behave. I didn't want conflict on my birthday. That was the plan. I was wrong. The day of my birthday arrived, and everything seemed perfect at first. My husband was helping me put the final touches on the table. My sons were setting up music, and the smell of fresh coffee and cake filled the house. My daughter-in-law arrived with a polite smile, holding a small gift. I greeted her warmly, pretending not to notice the slight roll of her eyes as she looked around the room. I brushed it off. Maybe I was being paranoid. After all, it's your birthday. Why focus on a slight look? But as the day went on, I noticed her growing restlessness. She kept checking her phone, sighing, and occasionally throwing pointed remarks about the way the table was arranged, or how some of the decorations looked cheap. I tried to ignore it, reminding myself again, it's your birthday. Don't ruin it over small things. But then came the moment that changed everything. My youngest son, who is normally the most cheerful kid in the world, approached me with a bright smile, holding a small cake he had made himself. "Mom, we made this for you," he said, and I felt a wave of happiness wash over me. I hugged him tight, thanking him, and then, almost immediately, my daughter-in-law let out a sharp, mocking laugh. She didn't even try to hide it. She said, seriously, "That looks like something a 5-year-old could make. Are you really going to eat that?" The words hit me like a slap. Everyone went quiet. My heart started racing. I opened my mouth to respond, to tell her that this was my special day and her comment was unnecessary, but she didn't give me a chance. She started screaming. Not a normal angry scream, but a full-blown, throat-shredding, every person in the room turns heads kind of scream. She screamed about how unfair everything was, about how she felt ignored and underappreciated, about how she hated that we always celebrated my birthday and never hers. I couldn't believe it. My husband tried to calm her down, my sons looked terrified, and my friends were frozen, unsure of whether to intervene or pretend nothing was happening. And then, she did the unthinkable. She pulled at her dress and exposed herself in a fit of rage. My entire body froze. My brain refused to process what I was seeing. I wanted to scream, to call her out, to do something, but no words came out. The room was a mixture of shock, horror, and disbelief. I wanted to disappear. I wanted the floor to swallow me whole. I had never experienced anything like this in my life. Before that day, I had always thought that family gatherings could only be ruined by minor arguments, awkward silences, or a misplaced joke. I was wrong. There are moments that are so traumatic, so sudden, that they leave you incapable of thinking straight. That was one of those moments. My first reaction was to pull my sons close and shield them, to somehow make this nightmare feel less real. My husband grabbed her arms, trying to stop her, but she shoved him aside, screaming that she wouldn't be treated like a second-class guest in her own husband's family. The absurdity of the statement didn't make me laugh. It made me panic. How had it escalated to this point? How could someone who claimed to love our family, act with such complete and utter disrespect? My mother, who is usually composed in every situation, had tears streaming down her face. She whispered to me, "I've never seen anything like this." And my brother, who was sitting in the corner, had his mouth open, frozen. He later told me he thought he was hallucinating. After what felt like an eternity, she finally stormed out, still screaming insults over her shoulder. The door slammed so hard it shook the windows. The room was silent except for my shaky breaths and the low murmur of my family trying to process what had just happened. I remember sitting on the couch, my hands trembling, staring at the empty doorway where she had vanished. My birthday party, the day I had looked forward to for months, had been obliterated in a matter of minutes. The celebration, the laughter, the love, it was all gone. And the worst part, I knew that the damage wasn't just temporary. The humiliation, the whispers, the family members who had witnessed everything. They would remember. I would remember. And my relationship with my son, my husband, my daughter-in-law, everything I had built over the years, was suddenly hanging by a thread. In the aftermath, I tried to reach out to her, to calm things down, to somehow mend what had been broken, but she refused to answer my calls or messages. My son was furious, not with me but with her, and yet I could see the pain in his eyes. He felt torn between his mother and his wife. I tried to comfort him, to tell him it wasn't his fault, but I could feel the tension growing, thick and suffocating, like a storm cloud looming over our family. I also started getting texts from my extended family, some sympathetic, some incredulous, some even blaming me for somehow provoking her. I couldn't understand it. I had done everything to make my birthday special, to show love, to create a happy memory. How had it turned into this nightmare? I replayed the events in my mind over and over, trying to pinpoint the exact moment where things had gone wrong. Maybe it was the cake comment. Maybe it was something I had said in passing weeks before. Maybe it was just her temper. But no matter how I rationalized it, nothing justified what she had done. Nothing, and that's when I started thinking about my options. Do I confront her publicly, in front of the family, to demand an apology? Do I try to repair the relationship privately, risking another explosion? Or do I step back, let the situation settle, and hope that time heals the wounds? I felt trapped in a maze with no exit. Every choice seemed dangerous, every step uncertain. I had never been in a situation where someone I cared about, and someone I was supposed to love, had humiliated me in front of everyone I cared about. The betrayal cut deep, sharper than I had ever experienced, and I knew deep down that nothing would be the same again. My birthday, which should have been a celebration of life and family, had become the day my trust was shattered, my dignity questioned, and my sense of security within my own home violated. So that's the situation I was in, and I had to make a choice. Before I tell you what happened next, the confrontation, the decision I made, and the consequences that followed, I want you to pause and think about what you would have done in my shoes. Would you have confronted her? Would you have stayed silent? Would you have tried to protect your family while navigating the minefield of her temper? This wasn't just about a birthday. This was about respect, boundaries, and how far someone could go before you said, "Enough is enough." I want you to really imagine it. Your family, your home, your special day, and someone turning it into a public nightmare. What would you do? I promise you, what happened next was something even I couldn't have predicted. After that day, I knew things couldn't just go back to normal. My house felt different, almost foreign, as if her presence had left a stain that I could feel every time I walked through the door. I tried to carry on with my life, going through my routines, smiling at my husband, talking to my sons. But inside I was seething, replaying the scene over and over in my mind. I couldn't stop thinking about the way she screamed, the way she exposed herself, the way she humiliated me in front of everyone I loved. Every time I closed my eyes, I could see it again, and the anger bubbled up inside me. I realized that something had to be done. I couldn't let her think she could just waltz in and destroy a moment that was supposed to be mine. I needed to take control, but I had no idea where to start. I decided the first step was to speak to my son. I needed his support, his perspective, because I couldn't handle this alone. I found him in his room, scrolling through his phone with a blank expression, obviously still trying to process everything. I took a deep breath and said, "We need to talk about what happened, about her behavior." He looked at me, his eyes tired and conflicted. "Mom," he said softly, "I know. I don't even know what to say. She went too far. I just don't know if I can say anything to her without making it worse." I nodded, understanding completely. "I get it," I said. "But I can't sit back and let this go. You saw what she did. You know it wasn't normal. We need to figure out how to handle her before she ruins more moments like this." He sighed and finally nodded. "Okay, we'll do it together. But carefully." That night I stayed awake, thinking through every possible scenario. I considered talking to my husband, but I knew he would try to take the peaceful route, the let it blow over approach. And while that usually works in minor conflicts, this wasn't minor. This was personal, humiliating, and calculated. I needed a strategy that would not only protect me and my family, but also set clear boundaries. By the time dawn broke, I had a plan forming in my mind. It wasn't about revenge in the cruel sense. It was about reclaiming my dignity, about showing her that her actions had consequences. I decided to address it publicly, but not in anger, calmly, firmly, and with all the evidence of her behavior laid out so that there could be no misinterpretation. The next family gathering came sooner than I expected. My husband had suggested a casual dinner, thinking it might help ease the tension. I agreed, but I was ready. I had rehearsed what I would say, anticipated her reactions, and mentally prepared for the fallout. When she arrived, the room went quiet. My heart raced, but this time, it wasn't out of fear, it was anticipation. I had decided that I would speak up immediately, before she had a chance to start any of her usual passive-aggressive behavior. I smiled politely, greeted her, and then, without hesitation, I looked her straight in the eye and said, "We need to talk about what happened on my birthday." The sudden directness took everyone, including her, by surprise. Her eyes widened, and I could feel the tension in the air, thick and heavy, like electricity before a storm. She tried to deflect at first, saying it was a misunderstanding, that she didn't mean to upset anyone, that I was overreacting. But I didn't let her off the hook. I calmly recounted the events, every detail, every word, every scream, every insult, every act of exposure. I spoke slowly, deliberately, making sure that everyone in the room could hear. I could see some family members nodding in agreement, while others shifted uncomfortably, unsure how to respond. I could feel my son's eyes on me, and I knew he was both proud and relieved that someone was finally standing up for him and for our family. When I finished, there was silence, absolute silence. And then I said the words that felt like the final blow. "Your behavior was unacceptable, humiliating, and will not be tolerated. If you ever think you can treat my family, or me, like that again, you will face the consequences." She froze. I could see the anger, the frustration, and even a hint of fear in her eyes. For the first time, she realized that her actions had real repercussions. She tried to speak, to apologize, to rationalize, but I cut her off firmly. "No excuses, no explanations. What you did was wrong, and it's on you to make it right." The room was tense, but I felt a strange sense of power, a relief I hadn't known I needed. I had taken back control, reclaimed my dignity, and set the rules for any future interaction. And then, as if to emphasize the point, I made it clear she would be watched, not out of spite, but out of necessity. Any behavior like that again, and there would be consequences that she wouldn't like. Socially, within the family, and personally. Over the next few weeks, the aftermath played out in subtle ways. Family members who had witnessed the birthday incident began to avoid placing themselves in awkward situations. My son and his wife's relationship became strained. He realized that she couldn't treat people this way without causing lasting damage. She started showing a quieter, more calculated demeanor, always polite on the surface, but no longer allowed to dominate or intimidate anyone. It wasn't revenge in the traditional sense. There were no public humiliations, no confrontation at a social gathering. But it was effective. Her aura of control, which had been so threatening on my birthday, was gone. I had set the boundary, and it was respected, if not entirely embraced. I also realized something important during this time: my own self-worth didn't depend on anyone else's approval, not even family. For years, I had been bending over backward to maintain peace, to keep people happy, to avoid conflict. But after my birthday, I understood that dignity and respect are non-negotiable. If someone violates them, no amount of politeness, patience, or tolerance will repair the damage. You have to assert yourself. You have to stand up and reclaim what is yours. That lesson, painful as it was, became a guiding principle in how I interacted with my family and my daughter-in-law from that point onward. I stopped over-explaining myself, stopped justifying my feelings, and stopped letting fear dictate my behavior. I had learned that being assertive doesn't mean being cruel, it means valuing yourself and your loved ones enough to set limits. Months passed, and the memory of that birthday incident lingered, but it no longer held the same power over me. Every time I thought about it, I reminded myself of the way I handled the situation, the calm authority I had wielded, and the respect I had demanded. My son came to me one evening and said, "Mom, I just want to say thank you. You handled that better than I ever could have. I'm glad you're on our side." Hearing that filled me with warmth and vindication. I realized that standing up for yourself, even in the face of humiliation, can strengthen bonds and clarify relationships. Some family members still whispered, some still questioned the dynamics, but I no longer cared. I knew the truth, and I had acted with integrity. Eventually, my daughter-in-law and I reached a sort of uneasy truce. We never became close, and we never fully trusted each other again, but the worst behaviors stopped. She knew that I wouldn't tolerate chaos, and I knew that she could be polite when she needed to be. The birthday that had been a nightmare became a lesson, a turning point that reshaped the way I approached conflict, family, and self-respect. I realized that life is unpredictable and people are unpredictable, but your response to them is always within your control. That realization became my armor, my guiding light, and my shield against future disasters. So, if there's one thing I want anyone listening to this story to take away, it's this: never underestimate the power of standing up for yourself, even in the most humiliating, shocking, or emotionally charged situations. Your dignity is yours, and it's worth protecting at all costs. If someone crosses the line, you don't have to let them define the situation or control your emotions. You can reclaim your power, calmly, firmly, and with clarity. And when you do, you'll find a strength you never knew you had. If you were on my side throughout this story, go ahead and like this video. If you've ever had someone humiliate you or cross boundaries you couldn't ignore, comment below and share your experience. Let's create a space where people can feel validated and supported, because none of us should ever endure that kind of disrespect alone. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this, stories where real people navigate impossible situations, face betrayal, and find their power again. Share your final thoughts on this whole mess in the comments section. I'd love to hear what you would have done if you were in my shoes. I'll see you all in the next story, and until then, remember to protect your dignity, cherish the people who respect it, and never let anyone make you feel small in your own home.